Welcome back to the Apiary, a knitting podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about sock heels and toes, and I have a lot of pairs of socks to show you. But if we haven't met yet, hi, my name is Lauren Rad, and I am a knitting pattern designer. I focus on accessories, and my special favorite thing to design is socks. So this is an episode that I've been very excited to make for quite a while. Today I'm going to show you 3 different heel styles and 3 different toe styles. Now, I am primarily a cuff down sock knitter, but many of these will work both toe up and cuff down. The modifications are very easy. So let's dive in with a look at 3 different kinds of heels first. The first heel I'm going to show you is the heel flap and gusset, and that's this guy. There are different ways to knit the heel flap. There are different ways to turn the heel at the bottom of the heel flap. But at its core, what you have here is a flat piece of fabric that is knit down from the leg of the sock. So you knit this part flat. Then you curve the bottom of the sock using short rows. And then you pick up stitches along the side of the heel flap to turn it back into a circle. And then use decreases right along here to bring back down your sock circumference to the circumference that you want for the foot of the sock. Now, I like the heel flap and gusset the best. I think it is the most versatile for the widest range of feet. And that is why I use it almost exclusively in my sock patterns. Unlike some of the other heels that I'm going to be showing you in just a moment, the heel flap and gusset is almost infinitely customizable. If you have a high instep, you can knit a longer heel flap. If you have a short or low instep, you can knit a shorter heel flap. If you have a narrow heel at the back, you can knit your heel flap across fewer stitches of your sock foot. So there are lots of things that you can do here to modify the heel flap and gusset to make it fit your unique foot. I also like the heel flap and gusset because it is the easiest to add reinforcing stitches, reinforcing texture, without dramatically altering the shape of the heel in a way that might make it not function as well. So you can see here there is columns of slipped stitches on this heel here. What that does is on the outside you have a layer of stitches. On the inside, you have a layer of slipped yarn going along the back. So the outside of your sock is rubbing against the shoe. The inside of the sock is rubbing against your heel. And because you have 2 layers of fabric here, that heel is going to wear through less quickly. If you're really feeling fun and fancy with your slip stitches, you can also do an eye of partridge heel, which is a different texture on that heel flap. So you can see this heel flap here has just columns of slip stitches. So it's all slip one, knit one, slip one, knit one, slip one, knit one, and then you purl all the way across. This one, you alternate which stitches are getting slipped, and so it creates this lovely kind of lattice-like texture on the heel flap. Isn't that so pretty? Now we can go into lots more detail about the geometry of different heel shapes and why different sock heels fit different feet better, but that's really kind of a separate episode and is going to involve a significant amount of math. So we're just keeping it simple in this episode and just looking at a few different shapes for those heels. The next heel I'd like to show you is the short row heel. Now there are lots of variations on the short row heel because there are lots of different ways to work short rows. So this one is what's commonly known as a German short row heel or a boomerang heel. And essentially what you are doing with all of the different short row heel variations is you work your heel inward first, working shorter and shorter and shorter short rows, and then you start expanding your heel back out, and that creates this wedge shape here. A lot of people like this shape because it looks the most like store-bought socks. I find, however, that if you have a high instep, this heel shape is not a great fit because it's too shallow. And what ends up happening is that if you put this part over your heel, this part here gets stretched out across the top of your feet, and so you end up with distorted stitches just across that top of your feet where it's going across the greatest circumference right here. However, I do think the short row heel is easier for many people to knit than the heel flap and gusset. I will say for me, I have knit so many heel flaps and gussets that I don't even think about them anymore. So the heel flap and gusset is not inherently difficult. It was in fact the first sock heel I ever knit. And I did not do a short row heel until about 10 years after I had started knitting socks. So don't let conversations on the internet about how hard heel flaps and gussets are, don't let those conversations deter you from using that construction if that is a construction that fits well for you and you want to use it. But many knitters do find that the short row construction is a little bit easier. It'll depend on what you find more intimidating. Are you more scared of working short rows, or are you more scared of picking up stitches along the heel flap? The heel flap and gusset does also have the benefit of symmetry, which on the one hand makes it pretty easy to learn how to knit, on the other hand does limit its modification ability. Its modifiability? I'm not sure. I'm making up words now because that's what we do here. The symmetry of the short row heel does limit your ability to modify it because, as with a boomerang, it goes out one distance and it comes back the same distance. So however much space you have in this part of your heel is going to be the same amount of space you have in this part of your heel. There is a modification you can do if you have a high instep. I have heard of some sock knitters who really like the short row heel, but have a high instep and want to make it fit better. You can insert what's called a mini gusset right here to give yourself a little more space for your foot. But for me at that point, if I'm already doing a mini gusset, I might as well just do the full gusset with the heel flap and really get a good fit for my foot. The next heel I'm going to show you is a heel that is known by a few different names, in part because you can't completely tell which technique was used to make it once it's finished. And it's this guy right here. This is sometimes called an afterthought heel, sometimes called a forethought heel, and sometimes called a peasant heel. Now, some knitters will tell you that the afterthought heel and the forethought heel are the same thing, and it's two names for the same sock heel. There is actually a difference. So the afterthought heel, you knit your sock in a tube until you're done closing up the toe, and then you go back and you cut open the spot where you want to insert the heel. The forethought heel is where you knit to the spot where you know you want to insert your heel. You put the heel stitches on waste yarn, and then you continue knitting the foot of the sock. Then when you're ready to knit the heel, you go back, you remove the waste yarn, and you pick up the stitches to knit the heel. But once you have your stitches on the needles for the heel, the construction of the heel is the same from that point onward. And in fact, if you have knit a lot of sock toes, this is going to look familiar to you because look, it's just like what you do for the toe. Those are slip knits there. Those are knit two together right there. Because what you're doing is you're doing essentially the same thing you're doing down here. You have your sock heel. I'm going to open it out this way so you can see. Look at that. You are decreasing and decreasing. And then you flip it over and you're decreasing and decreasing. So in some ways, this is a very easy, very accessible heel for a lot of newer sock knitters, in part because the construction is not something new that you have to learn. The thing that will make it challenging for some sock knitters is getting all of the stitches onto the sock needles. It's very easy to miss a stitch or two. There can also frequently be gaps here at the corners of the sock, which if you look closely, you'll see I actually end up picking up a couple stitches in the corner there and then working some extra decreases. Now, like the short row heel, this heel is kind of a shallower heel, so it's not always a great fit for people with a higher instep. What I do to make it fit me a little bit better is before I start the decreases, I usually work a couple rounds in plain stockinette to make the heel a little bit deeper. So that gives me a little bit of adjustability there that I don't have in the short row heel. The other thing some knitters may not like about this particular heel is that just like with the toe construction, you're going to have to graft those stitches together. And so if you do not like grafting, stockinette grafting, what is sometimes called Kitchener stitch, you are probably not going to enjoy finishing this heel because you got to do the same thing here. Now let's talk about toes. And I've kind of already spoiled our first toe we're going to talk about, which is the wedge toe. The wedge toe is kind of the most common toe construction that you're going to see. It is the toe that I use in most of my sock designs. Again, because it is familiar for a lot of people. And it's something that most sock knitters, once they get the hang of it, don't really have to think about it very often. So this is the wedge toe. The wedge toe is worked with decreases on either side of the instep and the sole. So you can see there are decreases here along the toe, right here and here. And then on the sole as well, you can see decreases here and here. And the decreases bring the toe together into a wedge shape until you get to the point where the toe is narrow enough, and then you close it off with grafting. Now, some people say they don't like the feel of a seam at the toe of their socks. This is not technically a seam. When the stitches are grafted together, the yarn is threaded in and out through the stitches to mimic the same stitches that are happening here. It'll just look like stockinette stitch. Look, I'll see if I can open that out for you so you can see that a little bit better. There you go. You can see the yarn has been woven through, so there's not a straight seam there. If you are grafting too loosely or too tightly, that can create a change in the tension in the toe, and so that can feel like a seam. But if you are grafting it together, it shouldn't feel like a seam with the bumps on the inside, like in a garment. The wedge toe can also be very easily worked toe up. Instead of going from your full circumference of the foot and then decreasing downward, you cast on the number of stitches that you need here, and then you increase outward until you have enough stitches to knit the sock. So this is what the wedge toe looks like on the bottom and on the top. And then this is what the wedge toe looks like from the side. Our next toe is my favorite sock toe for beginner sock knitters. And in fact, I used it on purpose in a sock last summer that I wanted to be more accessible for newer sock knitters. And it's called the round toe. The round toe has a lot of benefits to it. One of which is that it is completely symmetrical all the way around. It has radial symmetry and not just the bilateral symmetry of the wedge toe. That means the decreases are not quite so visibly stacked on top of each other, especially down here in these lower areas. So if you miss a decrease or if you're off by a stitch or two, it's not going to be quite so visible as it would on a wedge toe. I also love this toe for newer sock knitters because it is similar to something you've probably already knit if you're a newer sock knitter. It's similar to a hat crown. Look at that. The decreases work very similarly to how the decreases in a hat crown function. Another thing I love about this particular sock toe is that it's kind of roomier than the wedge toe. And that's because the wedge toe is kind of a flattened toe, right? And all the decreases happen on the side and the top part is just kind of going straight across. Here, the decreases are happening all around the toe. And so your toe shape is more of a dome that fits over your toes. This can be especially comfortable if you're one of those people who has a longer second or third toe, but I find even for other shapes, it can be really comfortable if you just like to have a little bit of wiggle room for your toes. And finally, something about it that makes it really appealing to a lot of knitters is that there's no grafting at the end. Just like a hat crown, you decrease down until you have 8 or 4 stitches, and then you break the yarn, thread it through the remaining stitches, and secure it. So there's no grafting. So before we wrap up with this shape, here is what it looks like on its side, each side. And then here's what it looks like on the bottom and the top. It's the same all the way around. What a cute little toe. The last sock toe I want to show you is what I think would happen if the round toe and the wedge toe had a baby. And it's this cute little toe right here. This is called the star toe. Essentially what is happening here is that you still have your 4 decreases stacked on top of each other, but they are spiraling around the toe instead of being isolated to the side. So let me see if I can open that out for you. You can see, there it is. There's that little spiral. Look how cute that is. You've got 1, 2, 3, and there's 4 right there. All the little spokes of that spiral. That is a sock toe, my friends. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. Like the round toe, the star toe can be really appealing for newer sock knitters because there is no grafting at the end. But unlike the round toe, it is a little less forgiving if you misplace a decrease here or there because the decreases are so carefully stacked on top of each other to form that nice little spiral there. Look how pretty the spiral is though. Oh, I love this toe. I should use this toe more. So both the star toe and the round toe can also be knit toe up. You just have to use a pinhole cast on and then increase outward in the places where you would normally put a decrease for this toe. Now there are other toe and heel constructions that we could get into, but then this would be a 3-hour long video. And so I figured let's cover kind of the most common ones first. And then if you have specific questions about other toes that you're interested in, we can cover those in future videos. So if you have questions about any of the toes or heels I've mentioned here, or if you have questions about other toes and heels that I haven't yet covered, drop them in the comments down below. Otherwise, that's it for today, and I'll see you next time.